A mentor once told me that whenever we have gatherings like this, that all the wisdom you need is in the room. And I really believe that. All the wisdom you need is in the room. Along with that, whenever we're talking about community transformation, it's also important, and that's why I'm glad that we have a diversity of people here this evening, that when you're talking about community transformation, it's important to have a diversity of stakeholders in the room. People that represent the business community, people that represent our political institutions, community leaders, elders in the community, and as Officer Clee pointed out last time we gathered, young people. And I think maybe we have 1 or 2 young people in the room tonight. So with that, what we want to do is talk about solutions from those 3 big areas. You have that? On the form, the piece of paper that you were given up front, the 3 big areas that came up from the survey were drugs, gangs, and gun violence. And so what we want to do right now is, from the last meeting that you came, I'm sure some of you have thought about some really concrete actions that this community can take. And what we want to do is collect those actions. If you have a few moments, you can write those down on the form that you were given as you walked in. Any ideas that come to you, please write those down. Now, does anybody need a form? So, some of the questions that me and Nick Means asked and Ms. Brenda Peoples asked the last session, they were what they call appreciative questions. And those are kind of questions that get to the bottom of things. What are some of the things that that you think of when you think about what a healthy community looks like? And some of those responses are really interesting. Like, for instance, we picked up on a couple of themes from those responses. One of the things that we kept picking up on was a sense of nostalgia in this community. How there was a working partnership between institutions like Livingstone, Miller Rent. People talked about how there were a lot of activities here, or there was a greater sense of community along the streets, more connection between children and the elders in the community, all these types of things. Now, there are specific actions that I believe that we can all come up with to begin to address each and every one of those. Now, drugs. Now, I don't know how to begin starting from that, because it's like a negative. So how do you create a positive action when you hear drugs? Look, what are some things that come to mind, or action that can be taken as a community together to address the presence of drugs in the community? Now, a part of that is there's an issue, as we noticed in the survey, between a lack of trust between the community and law enforcement. So one thing to think about is, how can we foster greater trust between the community and law enforcement? What are some of the things that can be done to do that? So I want to take a shot at that.
Perhaps you can identify where the drugs are coming from. Poor people tend to be consumers. We don't own anything. And perhaps if we could start to identify where drugs are coming from, I don't know if that's a positive or negative, but I think it's really important that if you have people selling drugs on Grimm Street, where do they get them from? Who are the big drug dealers? So how can we identify the transporters of drugs coming into our community?
Okay, thank you. right.
I gave it to Nick. I gave it to him.
Hey, okay. Ms. Black.
I would mention
What are some
something.
specific things along with that? Oh, sorry, is that, go ahead.
I want to mention something that may not be very popular with this audience, because we hear a lot of negatives as it relates to law enforcement. And sometimes for them to do their job or jobs, they are constantly aware of two things: reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Now, as a citizen on the west side of Salisbury, I'm not opposed to any law enforcement officer stopping me in my vehicle to do a review of what the contents in my vehicle are, whether he has reasonable suspicion or whether he has probable cause. What I'm suggesting is that we will have to, I feel, set up a barrier to disallow those drugs from coming into our community. Now, I don't know whether any of you agree with me or not, or whether the sheriff and the chief would be in agreement to take on this type of action. But they're coming in, and most of them are coming in by way of vehicular traffic. And I feel that will be one solution, or serve as a deterrent for those who are making their livelihood from the young folk. Let me rephrase that. When I was at Salisbury High School, I would say making their livelihood from young folk. But I'm going to dress that up and say from folk, young and old. When we think of drugs, we think of our young children. But that day is gone when just our children are involved in the use of drugs.
Mr. Evans, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
When you say that community, and I assume with collaboration with law enforcement, construct a barrier to prevent this from entering in, what does that look like? What are some things that community members today, people out here, can walk out of this room and say, you know what, this is our action list. This is what we can do as citizens to begin to create a barrier to prevent this stuff from coming into our community.
Bill Smith.
To report activity, drug activity. Come on,
He said big.
we're going one mic. Mr. Perry.
I'm not like Ms. Evans, I wanted to stop me about leaving my car. But I do want to suggest to consider, we have neighborhood watches and so forth, that the police could possibly partner with some of those neighborhoods to educate people about drugs and its effect in our community. Because all of us know some cousin, some friend, somewhere who's either selling or buying. And we have to get to those folks to let them know how it is hurting our community. So it's taking a risk, but you have to. Because it's not about the money, it's about the safety. So it's back to the whole notion of community policing.
Amen. So to add on to that, would it be fair to say that one thing would be to reinvigorate neighborhood watch groups that already exist? right? To reinvigorate them and to bring in more community partners with that, like churches, for instance, or other nonprofits that are already in the community. To maybe those can be sites to reinvigorate neighborhood watches that already existed, or maybe defunct at this point. Mr. Norman? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Page. Ms. Page, your mic. Mr. Norman.
I want to sort of represent great-great-grandmothers. And the reason that I want to bring this up now is because we talk about what police, the kind of reputation that they have, and we're bringing into this world very bright young children. And I think it has to start that there was police athletic leagues when I was growing up. And they work with the children because we have to change their attitudes as well. We have to instill in them where their protection is. And these young kids at 3 years old and 4 years old, they understand. They have deductive reasoning already. They can learn almost anything. And I think that we have to put a little bit of time into a real police athletic league. Now, I know that it's said that we have one here. I go by that building. There's never any action. Okay, we're out in the community. I never hear anything about the police, and I'm not saying that you have to get additional people, but they have all kinds of leagues, and now children are interested in all kinds of sports. And we can just engage more of what's happening with our children. And in that regard, they will definitely have some respect for their law enforcement.
So responsible then, if I was to write that down on a card and like a call to arms, a call to action, then would you say then that we need to bolster and make more public and support more that league in particular? Or?
Well, I think that first of all, the policemen at some level must know about the police athletic league and what it means to have it in a community. So, I mean, I'm not the expert there. I was just a participator about 100 years ago.
So it sounds like we need more community collaboration with the police department on that. Mr. Norman actually had his head up there.
What I want to talk about, most of you, when you say drugs, you're thinking about coke or marijuana. But the thing is that a lot of these kids are going to your medicine cabinet. And that's what you have to watch drugs from the hydrocodone and some of the other amphetamines that you have in your medicine cabinet. And a lot of things, and also alcohol is a drug also. Kids can't walk into the ABC store and buy it, but they can go into the drugstore and buy hand wash. That's 100%. That's all you have to do is put salt in it and you got a cocktail.
So how does the intervention work?
Pardon?
How does it?
If you have kids and grandkids, know what you have in your medicine cabinet. Count those tablets, and if they're in the house, make sure you count those things are missing.
So that sounds like parenting.
Right? Yeah, parenting. Right? Because that's where they have games in school, but they go to the medicine cabinet, just pick out pills, and it's sold in school. And a lot of them go to the emergency room because of that.
I just want to say that we talk a lot about athletics, but not all of our kids are gifted in that department. We're leaving out a whole lot of kids when we concentrate on that. So we need to tap into the other communities and maybe performing arts or any of the other activities. We're losing the music, you know? So all the kids are not great with basketball or football, soccer. We need to remember that. We really do. And I've heard that said over and over in talking to some of our kids. The second thing I wanted to say is this. When you take a look at our drug dealers, the drug dealers that are in the community, and you actually take the time to talk to them, you will find that they are great business people. They have smarts. They know what they're doing. It's just that it's not in a positive manner. And so we need to come up with ways of redirecting these skill sets that they've developed. Find ways that they can even come up with small businesses or things that are going to prosper them and keep them off the streets or off that wrong track, if you will. So those are the two things that I wanted to say is that number one, they're not all athletes. And number two, they have great business mindsets. And we need to tap into that and develop programs with that in mind.
One of the things I was going to add before, one of the things that community groups can do, and I'm not really aware of how prevalent or present that is in this particular community, but there's a method called asset-based community development. When the community comes together and defines what assets are present in the community. Typically, municipalities are done from the center, but it's important that this is done out in the community. So that's one thing to really think about. For community groups, for churches, for nonprofits, neighborhood groups to come together and say, you know what, let's figure out what assets are actually in the community. So that's kind of what I heard you saying. I talked about some high school students, and they're not here right now, because I knew that a lot of youth were not going to be present tonight. And I asked a question. What do the youth care about? Right. And I got several responses. And the thing I love about youth, you know, youth is kind of like, get right to the point.
Yes.
So what, you know, one young lady was like, why don't we have neighborhood block parties? Right. Where these can be events where where it can be intergenerational, older generations come together, the music that they love, right? Doesn't that necessarily be a gospel concert, right? Where there's discussion, there is prevention, there is awareness raising present. This is what you told me. I'm not coming up with this. This is what you told me. Another thing, the arts. There is an underground hip hop presence here in Salisbury. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. How many people knew that? Right. There is a significant cultural presence of hip hop artists in this community.
And spoken word.
And spoken word. And the thing that was going to me was, why can't we have a community recording studio? Right? That was one of the things that was, I didn't come up with that. A high school did from Salisbury. So, who's next? It's Norman, I think. Oh, Mr. Peoples. Got an intervention?
You know, one of the things we fail to look at is this, and I spoke with Chief Collins about it, is one of the problems with drugs is visibility. When, just like with the street lights, when street lights are out, that's what people do, they do, or do things that they uncover. So, if you're vigilant, if you're on top of the game of being visible, that helps. The other thing is you talk to the community and get the community to buy into it. Because the community, look at all the people sitting around here that's trying to stop these problems. So you've got police officers in here that's willing to help. Just tap into the source. Now everything everybody says in here is important. Now, only thing you have to do is go to 1-7. They have weekend activities, they have art, they have youth. Now, look at everybody in this room. Everybody in this room is getting old. Okay? When you in the Vision 2020 plan, 10 years ago, the young white kids wanted a skate park in Salisbury. Where's it at?
That's an intervention. Write that down.
They wanted a skate park. Okay? When young people tell us what they want, we fail to do it. Okay? When you think about it, there's nowhere around here for young people to have a good time.
Right.
Why? Because we have outlaw places where they can go and be teenagers. See, when most of y'all was young, you're cruising around with zest. You can't do that no more. So what can young people know?
Can I mention something real quick? Because the thing is, I want to get to specific interventions, because there's a lot of people that have really good ideas. we really want to get there, because we know what the problems are.
Yeah.
Right, we've thrown those, and the thing is, like for instance, a good example, I love what you said about there's very few places for young people to go to. On NPR, I listened to a young man who, I can't remember his exact title, but he deals with homeless youth in Charlotte, which apparently was a large number of homeless youth in Charlotte. And what he did was they created safe zones in neighborhoods where young people can go and be present with an adult or a team of adults. And they were present with each other, like a clearly demarcated safe zone where they can go and hang out. So that could be an intervention. Look at our neighborhoods and look at places or spaces that can be created. They can be social space, it can be activity space, and we already have city space here. And that's a specific intervention that we have. Safe zones here.
One more thing. Why did we just have that billboard up there for people to do why don't we have a wall that we let them do it in? I mean, you know, some of it's good, but when you stop and think about the broad got graffiti, give a wall.
Right.
You can't have it go in.
Right. That's good. That's good. I'm gonna need you. Who's next?
All the ideas are coming out wonderfully, and I got a whole sheet full of additional stuff as well. But I think one of the things, in order to make some of that stuff happen, we all got good ideas, all got passion, but what would be very, very helpful is to make certain that we get ourselves together and receive some training in accomplishing these things. That's the training of the process of how you organize to accomplish these goals. That isn't saying, oh, I'm going to go start a football team. It's how do you go about setting up a program? How do you develop the leadership skills to accomplish these tasks? Because otherwise we'll just have a beautiful list there, and we'll come back in 10 years, as William tells us, and we will still have the nice list.
Right. And one of the things that we can do is whatever action, and I guess me and my cohort here, we can figure out if we can group actions according to theme and find ways to communicate with people to create teams of people.
Yes.
Action teams around specific issues like youth engagement, youth leadership development, to address some of these things, and to have trainings and workshops. Like for instance, we can have Officer Clee come back up and talk to people about specific practices that non-government organizations, churches, local municipalities can do, you know, and not just limit to a 1-hour presentation where we get hyped up. Okay. So capacity building with stakeholders. Right. Collaborative team building among neighborhood groups, organizations. Who's next?
Support the street crimes unit and particularly the stop and frisk.
You said
Support the street crimes unit that's in existence and support stop and frisk.
okay. Well, I mean, of course, thank you for naming that intervention. But of course, again, culturally speaking, and I'm sure you're aware of this, I hope you are, there are some issues with that in particular populations and communities across the country. So I want to speak on behalf of the community, but thank you for naming that intervention. And a community would have to back that up, right? So, a lot of people here probably wouldn't back that, but I'm assuming.
And you send it to the police department anonymously,
And this way, no one will know who turned the person in or whatever. So I just thought this was really good to use if you want to be helpful to the police department. The other thing I want to say is that we know that most drug dealers are guys, people who have dropped out of school, who have low self-esteem about themselves, and they feel like this is a fast way that they will ever make money. The thing that we have been talking about, and I really hope we can do something, is the regulation of country school. This would be a great place to have something for technical learning, such as air conditioning, mechanical, CNA, cosmetology. Everybody's not college material. You know that sometimes you just don't want to go to college, they're school. But if they're good with their hands, this would be great for them to have something to look forward to, because as you know, someone who sells drugs and becomes a felon, usually that's all they want to do is sell drugs, because who's going to hire a felon? So if you create something where to encourage these kids not to get out, to work for something that you're capable of doing, and if you still work something, this would be, I think, would be a big help if we do that.
So if I was to put it on an action list, I would say a specific intervention would be to create vocational programs that are specific to the community and find space for that. Would that be if I was summarizing? Now, one of the things I want to tell you tonight is on your forms, if you could please, when you leave out of here, either leave them in your seat or leave them on the table on your way out. We're going to compile all that you wrote on, because we're not going to be able to get to everybody tonight. But whatever you wrote on that, go ahead and write on that. I need to move on to games, if that's okay.
I want to give Captain Melanie, I want to give her an opportunity to speak on the forum that Ms. Shirley was referring to.
Hey, the forms are designed to be anonymous because a lot of people do not like to be named. And on the form, it's specific, like if it's a neighbor, you can say like whatever the address is, Brenner Avenue or whatever. And then I will specifically assign that out to either a narcotics unit, but it doesn't have to be drugs. It can be breaking and entering. You can know that your neighbor's breaking into cars and you don't want to tell anything about it, but we like to know this information, so it's strictly anonymous. All you have to do is mail it in.
And where can you access that?
They'll be at the police department, but I brought the crowd 30 or 40 down to the store today, so they'll be in the neighborhood stores too.
I got to say something.
We're going to try to have that form on the city website so that you can click on it and download it as a PDF file and fill it out, so you won't have to go anywhere to actually pick that up. So that'll be worked on in the meantime.
Hey, we're talking about interventions here. Interventions. All right. You don't want to get off task.
Okay, I'm retired and moved back here from Hampton Roads area. And one of the interventions that I was thinking about since moving back and seeing so many with the drugs, the gangs, and all of this, if got all these brilliant minds in here, how about writing some grants? And in writing the grants, make it available for organized community watch to be able to have the kids do some of the work and get them involved, because that will take care of them off the street. That didn't take care of some of the blighted buildings. And by doing that within each community, you get community service points and awards that can be used later on transcripts. And money may be available if they want further education. So that would be a thing. And I've seen it work. And
So a specific intervention, if you was to put it down, grant writing
some kind of
programs
grant that
for nonprofits in the community or groups.
Part of community service organizations in your community. Get the kids involved, let them work, earn community service, and let them clean up some of the stuff they're breaking in and vandalizing, and then get the community service points to use on college applications, and then give them some kind of community, that's your star community student that will represent your community at a place of higher education.
So,
and you get them involved doing some of the work instead of us doing all the work.
Thank you, sister. I appreciate that. But we do definitely want to give time for gangs. All of those probably addressed that, didn't they? Because, you know, the things when we wrote this, I was like, man, these are like symptoms.
Yes.
Right? These are like symptomatic issues that will need, you know, because it's one thing when you have a fire in a house and you send the firefighters out to put the fire out. But if you don't go to the electrical problem that's causing the fire over and over again, nothing will be resolved. So when we talk about interventions, we're talking about getting to under the surface of things, getting to the root cause of things. And this would be brilliant to have social service involved in this conversation, because they deal heavily with that. Anyone else?
I wanted to say something real quick.
Oh, actually, Steve, he got the mic.
Yes, I heard the lady over there say about solving the police athletic. We have police athletic. I'm the president of it, and we already got 7 kids.
You said you're the president of what now?
Salisbury Police Athletic League.
Okay.
And it's been around for like 7 years, but the police really just got involved the last 3 years. And it's getting better. We got 7 kids, and most of them are underprivileged, low-income kids that need help. A lot of the city council people that came out there and seen them, a lot of people know it's around. But we need support to make it better. We got the kids, and they ages from 5-year-olds to 12-year-olds. So that's the age that we need for the intervention, because the older ones, they already kind of set in their ways. So we get support. We play football. Our main thing is football, but we done came up, in our Clark and a couple of us came up with what we call the village, where we're going to offer more things than just sports.
Amen.
We want to offer arts, everything. But
you got that information handy with you right now?
No, but I have just the kids right here that
Okay.
are in the group. So they already there. It's already there. Just we need support.
Where can we get information on this? Where can we get information?
It's me.
Okay.
And Chief Collins, and for the last 2 years, I want to say this, Chief Collins have supported, and they give a lot of money to make our team, because we travel. We don't play around here, well, we do play around here now, but we travel, and he has supported us with our uniforms and equipment. But football is just a character of what we're trying to do. We offer after school program, tutoring, and everything, but we need more support from y'all as a community. Because the kids are here, but
Thank you, sir.
we don't have the.
Right. Thank you. Now, make sure, you know, okay. Because the thing is, because I appreciate what you're saying. We got to be able to get to you and get all that information from you. Because I know right now you're not able to share all the victories, all the things that you had to go through to help organize that. So, you want your number on the board, sir? You want your number on the board? Is there a contact number for your organization?
714-754-1863.
Okay.
Round up.
All right.
Okay, there's a lot, as we've heard tonight, there's a lot of ways to make interventions with drugs and with gangs. We're talking about a root cause. When we get down to the root cause of drugs, people are either trying to feel good, or they're trying to block painful emotions, and that's where these different kinds of drugs come into play. Now, what do you do differently to handle those things rather than go to drugs? That's something you have to think about.
Amen. Thank you.
I think we've never had issues with dealing with younger children. But where the problem comes is putting in the time with children over 12. Once they get into their teens, they're not necessarily interested in doing the same things that they were doing when they were 8 and 9. So we must have something that challenges them through their interest. And board media is something they're particularly interested in. And they're very sharp. They just know that stuff. One of the things that I think we have not used, I don't think we have looked at our community college, Livingstone, and Catawba for the resources that they have within their staff, who can do some things without dealing with some of the very concerns that he had with some of the emotional issues. But I can tell you now that some of our young people in high school are dealing with drugs to support their families. It is a different situation. I don't mean that they're not doing some of the other things for pleasure, but they're doing a lot of it to support families, and we see that in our schools every day.
So what intervention are you calling for specifically?
The intervention I'm suggesting is that we reach out more to higher education, not necessarily just for the education there, but for them to be active, more active participants in the community. And I would say that we're not getting enough from our colleges and universities here.
How do you pull that off? How do you bring Catawba, Livingstone, community groups together to begin to address this? How does that get pulled off?
Just start with basically reaching out and going to meetings from them, asking, tell them what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish. A lot of times, when people don't know, they're not going to do it. So you have to make them knowledgeable of what.
So that's something that we can probably all pull together and figure out how to do that, right?
And have a plan.
Have a plan, okay?
And you gotta have money, because nothing's free these days.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
And I just want to say, I think education is just overall what makes a world of difference. Lack of knowledge, we will perish. And we're seeing that right now with where we are in our community.
What are some specific ways that we can be a resource to our education system to help that happen as a community?
One answer to that, I just think our parents are younger. I was a young parent, but it was just different when I was a young parent. Communities have changed. Just the whole idea of what family was, how I came up, a lot of us came up, it's just different now. You just have to, somebody will talk to the children, talk to the young parents. We've got to get them to understand that, your life has changed now. You have a responsibility. But not talk at them. Somehow or another we have to engage the parents and the children and just make them stronger.
Did anybody want to respond to that, to add on to what my sister said?
I think that, a lot of this is good and great, and just like Howard and Trevor said when he was here. A lot of times we develop these task forces to look at the problems, but we don't really involve the people that it's really concerned, and that's the children. We as adults say what we think, but we need to get the children involved. Like Mr. Miller said, he was talking about the younger children, but middle school children here are at a loss for things to do. There's no really any kind of outside structured activity except for school activity. But there are things that kids want to do after school. And the other thing is, we need to make better use again of our recreation departments. It used to be, I don't know if the hours of the recreation department has changed, but noon was the time that the recreation department opened. Kids are in school, most of them. A lot of them, I'm not gonna say most. A lot of them are in school, so those are wasted hours. I think the hours need to change. I think there needs to be more organized activity. I think there needs to be mentoring programs, and we as a community need to step up. We really need to step up.
So we gotta find creative ways to bring our youth in.
Exactly.
Development leadership. Y'all let me know when I'm supposed to be done.
When you talk about the colleges, one of the things that I remember, born and raised here in Salisbury, was that at Livingstone College and also at Catawba, because that's where my sister went, the community was really involved in setting up resources for the kids to have something to do. We're talking about money and stuff, and sometimes enough of the community would get together and go over and say, can we use your yard? Can we use your football field and do something, you know, with the kids? I remember at Livingstone, they had the big jumping thing, they had the educational books, they had stuff out there, but the community was involved in that. So I think that, like my sister here was saying, recreation centers, you know, we need money, I understand that, but sometimes if enough of us get together and they see that we're involved, that we want to do these things, and we have a plan, I believe that we can execute some of these things that needs to be done for the young and also for the teenagers. And I just think if we just get together and execute a plan, go over to Livingstone and say, hey, can y'all help us with this? Go over to Catawba, can y'all help us with this? I'm sure that there is some type of leadership team that they have over there where they're looking for the people because they have the resources.
So to rehearse that, I'll put down the action list. Again, would be to say, to create a collaboration and partnership between institutions like Catawba, Livingstone, with community groups.
And don't neglect their student government association in these colleges, because when we had our mentoring and tutoring and mentoring program, we did tap into the organizations, the students in those schools, and they donated their time and their efforts to do that, even down to teaching science labs for our students at the top. They came in and did that. And then Livingstone students came in and provided one-on-one tutoring. So it is possible to partner with them. And you don't necessarily have to go to the very top to do that. You can go to the student organizations on each campus.
Okay, good deal. So that intervention, what you got? In the back? You, yes, you. Watch it.
She was telling the truth about that, over the top at Livingstone, we'll set for example in the department, the football players would come out, they would assist doing, we got to do something physical, helping to clean up, the ground or something like that with some children. Also, a lady, I think Sherry said something about the recreation center. And what she was saying is, I used to work in recreation. And over the last couple of months, I seen City Park is sitting over there. I seen the City Center is sitting over there. And the middle center too. And these centers are supposed to be open because they are recreation. But they're sitting there, and what you don't realize is sitting there, the children aren't really utilized, and also they're sitting and they're going down because they're nobody. So what my solution is to open those centers back up. This is where kids can come in the afternoons and they can do homework if they want to. They need to put food papers back in here, some food boxes or ping pong things that go keep the kids active and to help them grow other than this computers. I know everybody has technology, but kids need to be active and they need to be doing something and they need somewhere to do.
So more community collaboration between park and recs or community facilities? Because it has to be more than just the city doing something, but the community and collaboration with the city. Because the city can plan stuff, but if the community doesn't support it,
But this way, the city, if the recreation centers are open, because they're supposed to have set times that they're open for the public use.
okay.
If the recreation facilities are open and got the program the kids can come to, it don't necessarily have to all be free programs. They can be programs that cost a minimum amount. But the thing is getting them there. It ain't a point of just offering programs and nobody. You have some programs for them to come to, and I'm quite sure that they'll come. They go to the YMCA, it's got set hours, it's got set things, because everybody uses the YMCA. But if you got
about the education piece, and drugs and gangs and violence, and to me, just a dumb guy. It just seems to me to be a lack of hope. People don't see a future.
What intervention can we do? Can you propose to us?
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going.
We don't have to go this.
I know. I just want to talk about the education piece again, because I think this community does have a tremendous amount of power. I've spoken with Kay on occasions. I actually set up my own meeting with education folks a couple of weeks ago to talk about this very issue. And what I would encourage you to do is to look at the non-traditional. I would begin to demand that we look at non-traditional ways of education, whether it be culinary arts, whatever that be. There could be dozens of them, and I'm telling you, this is not just, we're not looking back, we're looking forward. But we are so far behind educationally in technical and non-traditional education, that we ought to kindly meet as a community with our educators and say, listen, we need things where our kids see value. They don't see value in learning algebra. They don't see value in learning some of these traditional things. But trying to put together a jobs plan to where we can demand that there are educational programs both in the high schools. There are non-traditional programs clear down into first grade in surrounding counties around us. So again, I'm not casting dispersions, because we are on a fast track now to do much better. Thank you to what Kay and these folks are doing. But if I was giving an action plan and continue to talk about education, I would physically come together as a community and say, here are the things that our kids are interested in. We want them to be executive chefs. We want them to be, you name it. There's 1,000 things.
I have one person that needs to speak. Right. I'm actually almost out of time. All right. But thank you. So we need creative ways to have non-traditional ways to educate children in the community. Thank you. Is that it? Is that it?
Okay, thank you. I have two things to say. First of all, about our school system. I've read a book entitled How to Survive High School. Most of our children do not know how to survive high school. And one way that they said is that you have to be involved in more than just the learning process. Many of our children that are in these low socioeconomic areas are not involved in the band, cheerleading, any extracurricular activities. One thing that I know that works, because I was a part of it in the High Point system, we had a nurturing and reading enrichment class in the high school. And the three things that we worked with the children was on academics, attendance, and behavior. And those children were not sent home during the entire year. Their reading improved and their everything improved. And I'm speaking from experience, it's not because I was one of the teachers. So that's one thing. The next thing I do want to say is that Livingstone is involved, but we must have something that we're doing to get involved. We have a program in our church called FACT, F-A-C-T, that means Families and Communities Together. Livingstone College has let us know that we had a basketball camp there. They invited girls from the 5th grade to the 12th grade, and they were in a program called FIT, Females in Technology. And in October, they have opened up an invitation for us to bring 30 girls for a cultural enrichment part, and then they go to a game. So when we're doing something and they know about it, they help us.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. That wasn't easy. because I know a lot of people wanted to give their commentary, which is important. That's good, to voice how you feel about the subject, and also at the same time to be able to distill that into a concrete action that all community members can take. That's not an easy task for one night. Would you agree?
Can I add one thing?
Richard.
One thing. I'm a product of being mentored, and I firmly believe that mentoring is crucial. And we have to develop relationships with these young folks to give them something positive to want to follow. But you have to develop a relationship, because if they don't seem to think you're serious, they're going to read it, and they're going to know it, and it won't do you any good. But you've got to do that, you've got to develop that relationship, and you've got to provide some mentorship. And I really believe that's important.
Thanks, John.
Before we can get to King Hall, Alice Park, come up for a second. This brother right here, I've known him for a long time, and I'm making a plea out to Mayor Woodson, the City Council, Commissioner Pierce, the Rowan County Commissioners. Who else did I have? Kevin Alden, the Sheriff, Chief. We need to get this guy involved in what you have going on. This man did 18 years, federal penitentiary. He's got a story. He's got one of the greatest minds that I've ever been around. He was an entrepreneur. He's been there and done that. This is the solution. This right here is the solution. Alex and I spoke when he was actually incarcerated. He was wanting to do some things once he got out. So we've been in correspondence for quite some time. But this is the solution. But you got to get him on the payroll. You understand? So however you guys can come together and work that out, this guy has to be a part of it. Because this is the guy that's been in the streets. He's been there, done that. He's made, I ain't gonna tell you how much money he made back in the day. But yeah, exactly. But he's got a great story. And I think a lot of people have heard him speak and tell his story. But you gotta get this guy involved. He is a part of the solution. I'm telling you. He's already had some interventions. He's actually spoken to some of the churches. He's actually had people calling him left and right because he's made a difference already. But he's got to get a W-2. Got a 1099. Yes. All right. But from Chris Silver to you guys, I really appreciate you guys coming out. It means a lot. It's good to see my cousin Pee Wee Kerr back there in the back. Pee Wee was one of the soldiers here at Miller's Recreation Center, and he ruled with an iron fist. Even though we're blood related, he cussed me out too. But it's all good. But at any rate, I want to turn this back over to Brother Kenny Hart.
All right, I won't keep us much longer. We started about 15 minutes late, so we're going to end on time about 15 minutes afterwards. And first, I just want to extend an apology for the people that thought it was at 8 and actually came in at 8 o'clock tonight and missed the break session. But I had promised to those that did come in just a little bit late, I'll make sure that I personally get you the information so you can have everything that we had. So just my apologies for that. And, I like what Greg said about, we got to start kind of thinking of some innovative ways, but not a little cliche, thinking out of the box. But we got to stop using just these tried and true interventions and methodologies. I've been in conversations with some people who have connections with these gangs, and we talk about them like they're fictionalized people, but with some of these gang leaders or shooters, as they call them. And I said, I want to have a conversation. And I want to sit down and, I don't want any media, I don't want any public sizing of it, I don't want anybody else. So Chris and I have put ourselves out there to say, let's set up a meeting and talk to these people. Let's see what's going on. Because, we talk about these individuals, these kids, as if they exist in some type of movie or story or fairy tale, and they're not real people. So I want to hear what's on their mind. And I look at that as kind of a non-conventional or non-traditional way of an intervention. So hopefully we can get an understanding. I was having a conversation again with some people that are close to them 2 or 3 hours the other night. And I left there with a different viewpoint and a different focus of what we're trying to accomplish. Again, it's not just ridding a gun, it's not ridding a game. We have to really understand that these are living, breathing people, behind them. So what I also just want to close on, I appreciate everybody that came out tonight and really put our thinking caps on, thought process, the mindset, and hopefully we did come up with some intervention. I think the conversation, kind of strayed a few times and people, kind of got off, but I think we did come up with some great solutions. Now, it's up to you to take this back to your communities, your neighborhoods, and put these interventions in place. As we talk about forward thinking and forward action, if something doesn't happen in a positive way, you can't blame Mayor Woodson, you can't blame Karen Alexander, you can't blame anybody because you have the authority, you have what it takes to go back and put some of these interventions in place. No longer are we going to sit and bitch and moan and whine and complain and they're not doing this, they're not doing that. It's up to us. We can't give the keys away to our community any longer. And just talking to Mr. Evans, in the back as well. What we've got to also do is stop the finger pointing. This is not a black issue, it's not a white issue, it doesn't belong to one particular group. When we start again saying those people over there are them or those are you people, that we got to stop all of that too. And look at this as an issue that is impacting our entire village and our entire community and be willing. One of the things that the chief and I have talked about is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. There are some things that he is not familiar with or he's not comfortable about. And I told the chief, my phone is always on. If you have an issue or concern about the black community that you feel like you're not comfortable with, then pick up the phone. But if you go and do something and you screw it up, I can't help you after that. So I just want to say that we have the opportunity as tonight to stop looking behind us. We did that exercise and I just wanted to say I want to move forward. Last thing I want to do is thank the staff here at Miller Rec. I was over at Hall's Gym this morning. We had a basketball camp with Dante Miller that was going on, and a lot of people didn't know about the camp. So again, we have some communications breakdowns, but they had a great camp. But I was able to really work with the staff, so I appreciate Terry, Shaw, Steve Clark, Paul Moore, and all the summer staff at Miller Recreation Center for putting all of this together. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to kind of get this to work as smoothly as it does. So they have been really great about anything that we have asked for or we have needed. So with that, be careful